Hello and welcome to Shop Talk with Dan the Man. Today's video we're going to talk about this. This is WORX Cordless Pole Saw / Chainsaw. Stay tuned to find out more.
Hello, if you're new to this channel, my name is Dan Shannon. I enjoy woodworking as a hobby and being out in the shop. On this channel, dive deep into my shop as we explore tools and tool reviews, as well as chatting about everything related to woodworking. If this grabs you by the tool belt, please subscribe to my channel if you want more videos like this.
Hello and welcome to Shop Talk with Dan the Man. Today's video we're going to discuss this. This is WORX 20-volt cordless chainsaw pole saw. Now this is model number WG323. So like I said, this is WORX 20-volt cordless pole saw / chainsaw. And what I mean by that is I have the chainsaw in my hand. It comes detached from the pole saw feature, which is right here. So in this video we're going to go over the features, then we're going to jump into the hands-on, then I'm going to do some follow-up with some final thoughts on this tool. So if you're new here, welcome, thanks for stopping in, and if you're returning, thanks so much for coming back. Okay, so let's jump into the features. Okay, so we'll go over some features of the saw first, and then we'll jump into the pole. So let's slide that aside for now. Okay, so this is your standard chainsaw in all appearances, but it does have some slight changes to it compared to a regular chainsaw. So we're going to spin it around. You're going to notice on the top you have your fill for your oil, your bar oil. There is a gauge on the side that goes from full to empty. That gives you an idea of where the bar oil is at all times. And it's crucial that you have bar oil in the saw, or else your blade will heat up your chain and your bar, and yeah, not good. It'll warp it and whatnot. All right, so we'll slide from the top to the back here. You'll notice there's the trigger and there's the safety. So you have to press the button in first and then pull your trigger to engage the power of the unit. It will not engage unless you push in on this side button. So that's a good thought that they had for the safety on this tool. All right, so we go to the bottom side. You'll notice you have your 20-volt battery, and that just disconnects. There's a button on the back. You just push down and the battery will pop off very easily. We'll talk a little bit about the batteries in a minute, so I'll slide that. Actually, I'll leave that off for now. And you move ahead, you'll see that there's the motor section. So this has your brushless motor, and on the other side you'll notice it carries through the entire machine to the outside. This has vents. This does heat up fairly quickly just because it's a saw, so it's cutting wood. So it's great that they have the vents. All right, moving towards the front, you'll notice there is a guard that protects the inside where the chain rotates around the motor. You have your quick release, and this is an automatic tensioner for your chain, which is a really cool product actually. A lot of times you have the 2 bolts and you have to undo the 2 bolts. Then you have adjustment screw that moves your bar ahead or back. By having this just on a smaller saw, mind you, a bigger saw, I would prefer the bolts, but this has an automatic tightening, so you just turn it and takes the slack out of the chain on your saw. So over time, chain will stretch, cutting lots of boards, logs, whatever it might be throughout the day. the chain will have some slack to it, so you just take and tighten this up. And it is good practice to remove this cover every so often. Make sure your battery is off your tool, and you just unwind. It has directions right on this turning black piece, how to remove it. So you just unthread it, and then this will be removed. And I also double check on any of my saws, the oil. There's a spot there where it leaks the oil onto your chain underneath this cover, and it's great to check that periodically just to make sure it's not jammed up with sawdust or shavings. And every time I use my saw, I usually take this off, clean it up, and make sure that it's running. You can also do a check when you turn on your saw on a piece of wood. You'll see some oil splatter on the board just to make sure it's lubricating your chain proper. But then we slide towards the bar. You notice it says 10-inch on it, 25 centimeters. So that's your bar length. So that's how much wood you can technically cut. I wouldn't recommend it just for the saw. It's not crazy powerful. It does do the job, and I'll show you that with the hands-on. It is a capable saw, but you know, for the only 10 inches, you know, this saw can't cut a lot as far as it being a chainsaw. Pole saw, chances are you're not going to cut a limb bigger than that. If you are, you need to go up in a bucket truck and handle it proper and safely. I wouldn't want to cut anything bigger than 10 inches or even close to that coming down on my head. That's why you'd wear a helmet when you're in the woods. You'll notice from the top here, there is a fake bar break. It's not a real one. It's just plastic, flimsy. Doesn't actually snap or do anything. It's just there for looks, and it kind of guides your hand. So if you are cutting, it just another layer of protection so that if you slip off the grip, your hand won't enter the chain. So that is a good setup for the saw to have that. My rigid one does have a functional bar break, which I enjoy, but that's also a bigger saw made for bigger things. So basically that's it for the tool. There's not really anything on the bottom side. There is a bit more vents for your motor, and of course your battery mount spot. And it's great that they have vents on pretty much this whole saw, vents on the bottom, vents on the side, just to give it some airflow. And of course you have your felling teeth or dog teeth. There's different names for it with your bar. Now these are plastic. You can notice they're not metal, they're not sharp. So would I use them a lot? In the hands-on, you'll see me use them a little bit. But really, if you're using these into a big log, chances are your motor will bog out long before these will actually work well. I do have some nicer ones on my other saw, and of course, when you get into gas saws, they're really solid metal and quite sharp, just so you can dig into your wood as you're cutting and use those teeth to walk the chain down through the log. So this is very mild, very low-key teeth. Like I said, it's not made for anything big. All right, so that is just the saw part, and now let's jump into the pole itself. Actually, before that, I'll talk to you a little bit about the battery. These are 20-volt power share batteries. So WORX has multiple batteries, different sizes of batteries that you can get for runtime. You know, it's based on A, if they're on sale and if you want to buy the bigger ones, and B, how often do you use this saw. For me, I have about 4 of these smaller ones. They were cheaper. I could get them in a combo pack. So for me, I'd rather just swap out batteries. Also, you got to think about weight. So the bigger the battery, the more weight. So yeah, you get longer run time, but you also have that added weight that you have to think about. So when this is on the ground and this is attached, I don't mind the extra weight, but if you have this up in the air, and this battery actually comes off and goes on the pole, which I'll show you in a minute. So the weight is no longer in the air. The saw by itself does have some weight to it, but once again, the battery is removed and applied to the extension part of this tool when it is in the air. So it's a little bit on the battery. You know, you can get fast chargers. I got a combo one that's a 2-bank battery charger. Get individual ones, a little small one that snaps on. That wouldn't be a quick charge system, that'd be a slow trickle charge. So I'd recommend getting the faster charging station for these batteries, just so you can keep up, especially if you only have these small batteries to work with. All right, so let's jump into the pole. So slide that aside for a second. And here is the pole for your saw. So how this works, it's pretty straightforward. You have your end, and this is where your saw mounts. So it's pretty, we'll go over the features of this before I mount the chainsaw. So you notice at the top you have your mount for your saw. So your saw snaps into that, and then you have your tightening knob. So you can see a little bolt here, so that slides into the chainsaw just to keep it from not sliding off. So if you're cutting a tree and the saw gets stuck and you have to tug on it, make sure you always tighten this and have it always threaded in for that safety. That, or if the saw ever came off and like came down towards you because it wasn't clipped in proper. All those things, just make sure you're safe and use that bolt that WORX has given you. And notice towards the end of the saw, you have your trigger. So this here is super nice because your battery is at the end. So it's no longer on the saw at the base. And in this case, it would be the top, and then this would be your base for holding. So your grip, and as you're cutting, of course, your battery and your weight would be down here. So I would recommend a bigger battery for the pole saw feature because all your weight is going to be down low. But it is still something you have to move with your arms. So once again, it's your discretion. So here is the trigger. There is a safety just like on the chainsaw part. Push in the button and then the trigger will engage. So good safety feature there, works. And then of course your battery just mounts on the base just like that. Okay, so that is the extension part. If you want it longer, as you can see, this is already quite high. That's on the floor. If I want to cut something even higher, so think you also have your body height that factors into the length of this. But if this isn't long enough, you can undo this lockable tab. You just undo this orange locking tab up, and this will extend quite long. I will extend it all the way, and then you just lock it in like so. So as you can see, this is a lengthy extension for your saw. It will give you that extra height you need for your branches. And you can also climb a ladder at a safe distance and use a ladder as well. But I wouldn't recommend it just because a ladder could be unstable depending on if it's a hill. But use your own discretion at that. It will give you that extra height that you need. And to collapse this down to the smaller format, you just undo the lock, slide the whole thing back in, and then lock it back up again. So how does this attach? Well, we have the pole here, and we'll grab the saw. So all you do is you disconnect the battery. It just snaps off when you're pressing your tab. You pull your battery off. You can connect it to the end, and then this just slides over just as if you were putting on a battery. You just line up your grooves with the saw, and you wait till it snaps in. So now it's really nice and locked in, and then you can take your bottom adjustment bolt, make sure it's threaded all the way in, and it does show you on the side of this pole the directions, you know, how to tighten this bolt and loosen it to take the saw off. So that's what it looks like with the saw attached to the extension. You know, it looks like a chainsaw up in the air, and that's basically what you got, is a portable saw and a pole saw all in one. So I really like this tool, and yeah, let's jump into some hands-on with this and see how it will work out in the environment where it's intended. So let's jump into some hands-on. Okay, so here we are with the hands-on, and I have my pole saw. I have my extension piece on it. It's not all the way out, as you can tell. It's fully in. The branch I'm going to be taking off is not too high up. You can always measure it prior to, so just kind of raising your saw up to see how high it is. And you always want to make sure you have lots of length. So if this branch was, say, further up, I would want to extend my length, so that way it's not too short and I'm not reaching with my arms too long. So you definitely want to make sure that is set up correctly. Also, I'm wearing my hard hat just because I don't want any branches falling on my head, and I have my mesh to cover my face. So make sure when you're cutting, you always use the practical gear for safety, hard hat, earmuffs if you're using a gas saw, just protect against the decibels. Of course, I got my chain pants on and my boots. I'll show you that later on when we unhook this and use it just as a regular chainsaw. But for now, it's above me, so the chain pants aren't necessary, but I'm going to be using those further on in the video. Let's go ahead and cut this branch, and I'll just kind of show you how the saw works. So I have it connected. Make sure it's nice and tight here, and the saw is not going to move at all on you. And then I'm just going to lower my visor, and we're going to cut the branch. So you want to be underneath, not too far. This is a good angle to be at, so when the branch falls, you're not underneath of it. You never want to be directly underneath the branch. And so we'll just cut it now. Okay, so it's just that easy to remove that branch off that tree. What's good too is this has decent weight. Pros and cons. It's got decent weight to it. It is heavier than some of the other models, and I'll share later on at the end of the video why, pros and cons to that. But I do like the extra weight, so when you're cutting the tree, it's resting down on the tree, so it actually helps with the cut, having some weight up there on the tree, especially when you have a V cut to make close to the trunk. It gives it extra weight to push the chain through. So pros and cons. It's heavier, but it also helps with the cutting. So I'm going to do another one, a higher one. So in order to do that one, I have to adjust the overall length of my pole. So I'm going to do that now. So just a tab here, and you just pull the whole saw out. Then you lock it back in place. Just that easy to do. So it's a bit higher. We'll go up higher. As you can see there, that's really good height for the saw. I'll put my face mask down just for branches, and like I said, you don't want to be directly underneath. So you want to get in close to the tree as best you can. And it's just that easy. So you probably noticed it's a little top heavy. When I took it down, it was bouncing a little bit. That's perfectly normal. Just kind of make sure you got a handle on it, you know, as it's coming down, so it's not gonna fall on you. And then when you're done cutting that, of course, you can take the lock off, bring the saw back down, and then lock it back in again. So it's just that easy to cut a high branch and then cut a low branch. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward that way. Cutting anything lower on the ground, say this trunk here, you want to trim you know, some branches off it, just disconnect the saw, use it handheld, and then once you get up to a higher branch, then you of course add the extension. All right, I'm going to cut a couple more lower ones just to give you an idea again how it can cut some of the branches off your trees. So you want to get in close to the V of the tree. That way it makes a nice clean cut. And this one I can get a good distance back. And that's that. It's just that easy to cut the branches off the tree. And so now we'll jump into the second part, which is using just the top unit. Okay, so here is the second part of the hands-on. This is why I like this pole saw so well, is not only is it a pole saw, it's also a chainsaw when needed. So you go from the pole saw, you just undo this bolt here, pull it away from you, and the whole saw just slides right off. And since there's no battery on here, you just go to the end of your extension, pop the battery off, press the button in, pull, slide the extension away because we don't need that right now. Snap it on the saw, and you have a saw now. So that's what I like most about this pole saw, is you can disconnect this saw from the extension. So not only can you cut up high, you can also cut up some smaller logs for your wood pile. So we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to show you what this saw will do. This is not a brake as I showed in the features. It's just a piece of plastic to kind of guard your hand. Since this is electric, it does stop the chain pretty quickly. So without the brake, you know, it's not as good, but at least you have that guard there to protect your hand. If you slip, it's not going to go forward. I do have my chain pants on just as a precautionary. I don't really need the helmet because there's nothing falling on my head. The mask is good if you get any chips coming at your face. This little saw won't be as violent for chips, but it will throw some chips. So it's up to you, whatever you'd like for that. But yeah, we're going to start in now and cut up some of this log, and I'll show you how it handles. Okay, there's the first cut. And I will mention your chain, you always check it to see how saggy it is over time. Cutting, pinching, pulling it back, it will stretch a brand new chain and it will sag. This saw, what I like most too, also has an auto tensioner. So you just turn this a bit more and it will snug the chain up. You just tighten it and away you go. So let's jump into a couple more cuts. Now, with this saw, it's not crazy powerful. You do have your dog teeth. Normal gas-powered saw, you'd really use that to dig into your wood. So as you're cutting, you would use your dog teeth to rock the blade back and forth. Now, this is a very small saw. It's not made for high-powered usage. Won't be cutting big, huge logs. Like smaller ones, I would say this size is a very good size to cut with this saw, just because of the motor. It's not very powerful, but as you can tell, it does cut this just fine. I did cut a good sized birch tree one time with it. The birch tree was probably 8 inches, and it did handle it. I went through quite a few batteries. So yeah, putting into the hard situation, it will cut just fine. But you know, on a standard practice, I wouldn't recommend you know, cutting your year's wood with it. But yeah, it does work great. Let's do a couple more cuts. Alrighty. Well, it gives you an example of this saw, and as you can tell, it cut through there. This is a decent size. It's hardwood, so it does cut just fine. It will trim up smaller stuff. Like I said, I would recommend you know, smaller branches. This stuff is a little bit more intense, but it can do it. And make sure you have a bunch of batteries on hand, because these batteries don't last too long. And like most tools, you can buy bigger batteries. So that's the hands-on of this tool. Let's jump into some final thoughts. So some final thoughts on this saw would be the fact that I bought it as a pole saw. That was my only intent of buying the saw. I just wanted something that I could have an extension on, put it up in the air, and cut back branches. I have a driveway, and over the years it has grown in quite a bit, so we have lots of overhang, and it was scraping our vehicles. I was getting complaints from the oil truck as it was backing in. So I needed some way to customize my driveway to bring the greenery back, and this pole saw made quick work of that. Actually, so much quick work that I was looking at other trees just to trim back, just for fun, because it was a joy to use this saw. Some of the other models, the chain and the motor is at the end of the pole, and you cannot disconnect it. It is made strictly to be a pole saw, and that's it. What I liked about WORX product, this one in particular, this model, is I could disconnect the chainsaw part from the pole. So if I was cutting something small on the ground, having this big long pole just wouldn't make any sense. You'd be like 10 feet away trying to cut a board or a log. It just wouldn't work. So that's why I liked this particular product. They do have another product that's strictly the chain on the end of the bar. You can't disconnect the two. It is lighter weight, so I will bring that up. It is a con having this saw attached to this pole way up in the air because of the weight. So this does have a pretty hefty weight to it, within reason. I mean, the average person would probably be all right with this, but it does have some weight, especially when you have the oil topped up. You have that extra weight for the liquid. But I will say the pro to the extra weight is once you have it up on the tree, your branch, the extra weight of the saw will come down on the branch and actually keep the saw in place, whereas the lighter ones, they kind of bounce around and they have a hard time biting into the limb that you're trying to cut off. So I would say that is a great pro to this tool, having that weight up on the branch as you're cutting it, because it naturally brings the chain down through the branch. So, you know, pros and cons, you have to weigh all these tools that you're using and what your use is for. My father-in-law bought one, the different model, like I was mentioning, the one with just the chain on the end, because he specifically just needed a trimmer for his trees. He has a gas-powered chainsaw to do logs and get his wood prep for the winter season, so he did not need this difference between taking the saw off the extension. But in my use, I really enjoy that feature, and I'm glad I bought this model for that. So that's kind of it for the final thoughts on this pole saw, the pros, the cons, why I purchased this saw. And thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching. Please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please click on that subscribe button if you want to be part of the Shop Talk family. And like I say with all my videos, just get out in your shop. Doesn't matter how big or how small it is. And in this case, talking about saws, maybe get out in the woods here and there and trim back some of your foliage and get everything taken care of on your property. So I do have another review of my rigid chainsaw, so there'll be a link left below for that if you're interested in an actual battery powered chainsaw. I do have that, and that'll be a link below. So thanks again for watching. Have yourself a great day.